ask you about yourselves and what you're doing here today, please.
Well, I'm Jeff Vandermeer. This is my husband, Jeff Vandermeer, and together we have co-edited several anthologies, including Steampunk, Steampunk II, Steampunk Reloaded, and also the Cabinet of Curiosities, the Factory T. Lamb's Head Cabinet of Curiosities.
And I've worked with S.J. Chambers, the Steampunk Bible. It's neither as complete as an encyclopedia nor as random as a treasury.
Now, I would say that your Steampunk Bible is quickly becoming one of the seminary works of our budding genre.
Well, it's meant to be a starting off point. It's totally impossible to basically collect everything that's out there, and I think that the fact is that there's so many new people entering steampunk all the time, and the established creators doing new stuff, that all the book can hope to do is capture a snapshot and kind of give a good grounding in the basics for people who are not familiar with steampunk as well. We found that a lot of people who are not into steampunk have emailed us saying they read the Bible and then that led them to other things. So that's, I think, very satisfying.
I have been following archiving a little bit for the past couple years, and I would have to say that even I found the Bible very useful and informative and very inspirational, because it does give you the sense that you're connected to something much larger beyond your provincial area. And I certainly want to thank you both personally for all the blood, sweat, and tears that you've put into the Bible and the Steampunk Anthology and Steampunk II. And how did the two of you become involved with? What started this?
It was actually an anthology called New Weird, of all things, and it was very successful through a publisher called Tachyon, and they wanted a follow-up, and we thought, well, steampunk seems like something that would be useful to kind of like catalog the first wave of steampunk, K.W. Jader and James Blaylock and people like that. And
what year was that?
That was in 2008. It just happened to come out at the same time as the New York Times article. And we had been so unimaginative as to name our anthology Steampunk, and so anyone who Googled Steampunk and was looking for a book, they found our anthology.
But sometimes the straightforward way is the best.
That's true.
Just keep it simple.
But we did not know much about the subculture at that point, but we were invited to a California Steampunk convention. And that's when we actually got really invested and interested in it, because it had so many different facets. And it was also interesting because there were people in the maker movement who didn't know as much about the literature, so there was a lot of information transferring.
We seem to be a very large and disconnected nation.
Well, it was the first time that we met Jake Von Slack, who is the maker of this beautiful positronic brain. And when we were at that convention in 2008, we were the only ones that represented anything in literature. So all the other people that were there that were so involved in other aspects of the subculture did not know about the literature, and we did not know about the other stuff. So we kind of got together, and it was beautiful. And hence, Steampunk II, Steampunk Reloaded came out of that. And so here you can see, in the Bible, you see Jake Von Slatt was making it. This is where he is making it. And then in the cabinet, it's completed.
With a fictional story behind it. So this is actually the first time that he created a fictional machine that he had to create a backstory for, kind of his own short fiction story about it.
And this is the positronic?
It's a positronic brain. It's supposedly a Victorian era, like, external brain for yourself. But then we also had a writer write a story around it, Anna Lee Newitz, who writes for IO9, is one of the editors there. And she made it into a cultural transference machine that basically allows different cultures to understand one another, which I thought was kind of neat.
A cultural transference machine.
Yes.
Now, I would argue that a cultural transference machine would almost be as important, if not more important, than a language translation machine.
Right, it's almost like the Vulcan mind meld, if you think about it in those terms, where you can, understand where other people are coming from.
That is a wonderful concept. That is a wonderful concept.
And doesn't it look like you could do that?
I don't know. But I am curious about where he came up with some of this stuff, because he told me he had all this stuff that he was putting into it, some of which was more contemporary and stuff that he had gathered from antique shows and whatnot, so I don't really know the provenance of all the different moving parts.
I do love Mr. Von Slatt's stuff, and sometimes I'm extremely hesitant to ask him where he would get his parts and or inspiration, but oh, thank you so much.
Sure. And even around the back there's a little thing down here, I don't know what it is, and
it's filled with mystery.
Yes.
That is the wonderful thing about this. It is filled with mystery. Now, let's talk, if we could for a moment, about what the two of you are doing, because you have this book here, The Kosher Guide to Imaginary Animals.
Yes. Well, this is actually quite an interesting book. One time my husband and I were taking a hike, and it was right before Passover, and with Passover there's all kinds of food restrictions, so we started talking about different imaginary animals and whether or not they would be kosher and why or why not. And that just led into this whole hilarious thing that my husband put on his blog, and then someone approached us and said, let's do a book. And so we got Duff Goldman from Ace of Cakes to actually talk to us about recipes. How would you cook chupacabra? How would you cook Cthulhu? You know?
Cook a Cthulhu.
Right, exactly.
Cthulhu is very tough.
Well,
It's been
yes.
marinated for a long time.
Well, maybe that's what he's doing in Sunken Rylith. It's actually an enormous crock pot.
Right.
And this is part of the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yes, which is basically a treasury of modern fantasy in a way, because it has so many amazing creators in it, from Mike Mignola to Greg Broadmoor to Lev Grossman to Naomi Novik and a bunch of bestsellers.
And of course Sherry Priest as well.
But it has the conceit of this imaginary doctor who had this huge cabinet of curiosities from all of his travels, and so these are stories that are based on them. And in some cases the writers wrote to art, and in some cases we had the art afterwards. But there's over 70 images in it, and although it does tend more towards, I guess, the darker Gothic side, it also has quite a few stories that could be considered steampunk in some way.
Okay. And here on this side of the table we have some weird tales.
Yes. Weird Tales, you don't necessarily think about steampunk when you think about Weird Tales, but we did do a Steampunk Spectacular issue right here, and the cover was designed specifically for us by Molly Crabapple, who's the creator of Dr. Sketchy's art show. And we have several steampunk stories in there and articles, but if you, this issue was done for particularly the Steampunk World's Fair last year. That's when it came out. And so we were the literature track promoting the Steampunk World's Fair with that issue. And then I'd also thought I'd bring some of my current issues if people just wanted to take a look.
It's all wonderful stuff.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
all absolutely wonderful stuff. Now, you had mentioned previously in a panel I attended, there's a Weird Tales book coming out.
Well, actually, it's not a Weird Tales book, but it's a book of weird fiction.
Weird fiction?
Right, weird fiction. Now, a lot of the stories from that book are originally from Weird Tales. It's a compendium of weird fiction over the past 100 years, starting in 1908 and going through last year. So it's actually more than 100 years. And my husband and I spent many, many, many hundreds of hours reading
over
fiction.
6 million.
Oh my.
6 million.
But we cast a wide and far net because we were looking for weird fiction all around the world from every single perspective.
So there's 20 different countries represented in terms of the authors, and we commissioned like 7 or 8 new translations. We have whole short novels in there. It's 750,000 words, 1,200 pages in an oversized trade paperback. They actually did it in 2 columns, which I was unsure of at first, but because it's oversized, it's actually very readable. And it's coming out from Atlantic in the UK in October, and then we don't
This
know.
October, 2011.
Yes. And then next year it'll be out in the US. We don't know who the publisher is yet, but there's several who are interested. So,
Okay.
we'll have that information soon.
So, everybody wants your stuff. Where do they find it?
They can find it at any bookstore, and obviously here at DragonCon, all the dealers are carrying
They
it.
have all of our books. They have all of our books. And
But usually you can find it in any. I used to say every Barnes and Noble in Borders, but every Barnes and Noble and most independent bookstores, and of course online at Amazon. But these are from,
We always encourage people to support their local independent bookstores.
absolutely.
And is there anything you would like to add? Is there a website people should go to look for your project specifically?
You can go to jeffvandermeer.com. You can also go, starting in October, to weirdfictionreview.com, which is where we're going to be starting basically a clearinghouse for talking about weird fiction.
I want to thank you both very much for your time today.
Thank you.